Hey, John Gilroy here. In 1957, Johnny Carson launched a television show called Who Do You Trust? Today, let's look at trust, AI, and the federal government. Hit the music, Manny. Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast. My name is John Gilroy. I'll be your moderator. We are recording this at the SAS Innovate Tour, D.C. The reason I'm recording this is in case you didn't get a chance to come down here and participate in the excitement. And our exciting guest today is Caroline Baldwin. She's the director of SAS Federal. You going to really dive into AI and the federal government today? This is a big topic, Caroline.
It's a minor topic here in D.C. these days. I feel like you can't have a single conversation without AI coming up.
Yeah. I got here early, and I sat down, and I listened to the keynote presentations. I took like 5 pages of notes, and there's so much going on. It's like, well, let me tell you what's going on at 2 o'clock this afternoon. So, Caroline, first of all, how do you keep up with all this change?
The regulations, I feel like, change every single day, at least what's sort of proposed on that side, but even what agencies are attempting. I think back to 12 years ago and 10, 12 years ago in federal, you would just pray for statistics to be listed in an RFP. Fast forward to now, everything's AI, and you don't see a solicitation without that. And it's from every different use case. So from our standpoint, it's really being focused on what we can help with and really supporting the wider partner ecosystem there.
I read all kinds of things, listen to podcasts, and one can say that there might be some hype about AI in the federal government. So how do you distinguish, how do you separate reality from the hype?
A lot of hype down here. I'd say what we do is I take a focus on partnering with agencies and their leadership and the mission problem that they want to solve. We could geek out on tech for tech's sake all day long about what's newest there, but if government can't apply it for an outcome for the agency or to improve American lives, it's just a science project. And I think that's where, at least this afternoon, we're going to focus on how has AI actually been applied to mission problems in a way that's made a difference. And then that being a way to repeat across agencies.
In universities, they have engineering, then they have applied engineering, don't they? So it's kind of like getting into the real world here. So I go through my notes from many speakers this morning at the conference, and people this morning talked about governance, transparency, human beings, human oversight, privacy, security. See, these are all important topics for federal AI, isn't it?
It is, truly. And that's where there's a lot of options out there. And I think with government, it's never about one solution. It's around how do you bring the best on the commercial world in for each different piece to be able to fit. And that might be around governance, that might be around security, but in terms of our federal government systems, it's the cohesion of them together.
Golfers will say, drives are for show and putts are for dough. So they know where to make the money. So let's go to the same thing in the federal government.
Well, I'm the queen of the 4-putt, so if that tells.
There are less flashy but high-value areas. In other words, so you can drive a ball 300 yards. So what?
Yeah.
So what are the less flashy but high-value areas for the federal government where AI is already helping?
Yeah, so to me, there's a few areas. One, government doesn't have a shortage of data. And so where I'm seeing some of the most compelling use cases are actually AI around data management and how you govern the data. We can talk a little bit about that, but the other use case that I see a lot of is being able to do more on the advanced analytics side, being able to push computer vision models, being able to do more advanced capabilities. So I'd say a balance between using AI for data management, but then governance around AI models are probably the two most compelling things.
One theme from all the speakers this morning is this concept of trust. So what does trustworthy AI mean in practice for a federal agency?
You think about the decisions that get made from our software systems across all of federal government, whether that's, a Medicaid or Medicare benefit, whether it's an EBT card running and someone having SNAP benefits that particular month, whether it's national security. And that to me is you need something that's going to either hold up in court or that can bring the assurance that a decision has been made in a fair and just manner. And from my standpoint, that's where new technology is great to bring in, but where I'm seeing a gap is a lot of those AI vendors, startups, bridging into government, whether that's the security requirements or trying to break in. And that's where, honestly, for us, we partner with a lot of different folks to be able to bring them into the ecosystem. And so for us, it's a SAS and story to where we're bringing some of the latest and greatest, like you saw this morning with generative AI and LLMs, partnered with our software in a way that is secure for Department of War or civilian users so that they're not sharing their data back to those companies that maybe don't have federal security standards in place.
Well, in Washington, D.C., everyone has certain patois or vocabulary that they use. And 3 words that normally don't come up in conversation here are return on investment. So can we apply that to the federal government investing in something like SAS?
Absolutely. It's funny you say that. I actually think ROI has come up more the past 18 months than I've probably heard in 18 years prior working in the D.C. area. Trent's going to hate me for saying this. Maybe that's because of Doge or others, but it's one of those where IT software, I think, is being scrutinized on that side, but looking at ROI in terms of savings or fraud detected, you start to see very quickly that a lot of these commercial technology systems actually yield very quick ROI in terms of the spend versus savings that are then going back to Americans or fraud that is prevented from going out.
One of my biggest challenges is doing show prep and trying to understand some of the new concepts with AI. I can't do it alone.
Yeah.
And so neither can a federal agency. So what guidelines do you have for federal agencies partnering with companies like SAS to just figure this out?
It's a great question. So a lot of people don't know SAS actually came out of the U.S. government, and we're one of the largest privately held U.S.-owned and operated software companies. What that has meant is because of that trusted relationship, we frequently have agencies calling to partner with our R&D teams. So I joke everyone's oh shit moment, if you will, during COVID when we all ran out of toilet paper, literally the oh shit moment of our household at least. Georgia Pacific contacted SAS to ramp up their toilet paper production in order to be able to make sure, their paper plants for processing enough paper to then optimizing it toilet paper to American households. You fast forward to that, another federal agency called us to help find and analyze and optimize getting a COVID vaccine in place. There's another civilian federal agency where we have tackled some of their toughest problems around route optimization to be able to do it faster. And then even some of our national security agencies will call us to say, have you solved this problem or have you looked at this problem? And the good news about our organization is because we're global, someone generally around the world has looked at the problem, and so we're bringing that back for them to partner. And a lot of times we're just sharing those lessons learned, saying, don't do this, or this didn't work out, and it acts as an accelerator on that side. So in a lot of ways, we act as a partner from that standpoint, or co-develop with them capability of interest.
I'm glad you brought up Georgia Pacific. Now, when you partner with Georgia Pacific, you have different problems with compliance, but when you partner with a federal agency, it's a whole different kettle of fish, as they say in some places. So compare some of those challenges, Aaron.
Yeah, what I find is federal agencies, we are often solving for a rare problem. Detect some rare event, I don't have the data to support this, or if it's national security use case, I can't share this data, back with you as an organization, it needs to stay here. And so what we've actually found the past few years is a lot of those government excuses haven't necessarily held up. We've been able to find commercial use cases, whether that's the Georgia Pacific, whether it's work that we're doing with Nestle, whether it's work that we're doing on the Mack trucks, or even others, and bring it to government to be able to tweak commercially what's being done for the government use case, and it goes pretty seamlessly. I mean, I will say I was surprised given the pain I live with federal security requirements.
and governance, the number one concern from the IDC report we can talk about later in the show, but that's a really important concern, is governance. We are on 14th Street, Caroline. I don't know if you're from the D.C. area or not, but we can go out the door here and walk a few blocks. We run into the Department of Agriculture.
Yes.
And this has got a tie with you. You mentioned it earlier.
Yeah.
SAS had to start with the Department of Agriculture.
Yep.
So tell us about advanced analytics and how you see it progress over the years.
Yeah, so the joke that I love that our founders tell is When we first started, it was off of a grant from USDA, and it was for using statistics to count cows. And one would say we over-engineered it a little bit. Fast forward to, what I would say is supporting the federal statistical community. Every statistical agency, we support those users, but probably what I'm most excited about in the future is some of the work that we're having around digital twins and looking at synthetic data with agencies. Our R&D department has done a lot of not only development on this, but research. And one of the pieces that's really jumped out to me is training models off of synthetic data can be done to create more accurate models more quickly and in a cheaper fashion. And that, to me, is something that we haven't necessarily seen come out in the federal landscape that I'm excited for the next, I would say 5 years, but I don't even think it's going to take us that long at the pace things are going, that if you look at the civilian agencies or the national security agencies, where they don't necessarily have the data to develop the analytical models that they want, the rise of synthetic data helping them do it to produce more accurate models, but also full circle back to the governance. You have to understand how you developed it for it to ultimately hold up in court or some other decision like we talked about. And so that's where my teams are very focused, is talking to agencies about how they govern their data, how they govern their models, but then also looking at what are the advanced modeling use cases that we can either partner with them on from an R&D standpoint or, utilize synthetic data and digital twins to run simulations to create them.
The whole idea of advanced analytics and making it practical, digital twins is almost a case study. It's perfect for it. Because
right.
I can remember back when NASA had a problem with a satellite.
Yeah.
And we just can't go up there and get a wrench and fix it, so they had to come up with some kind of an emulation of that. And when they introduced digital twins, companies like SAS said, well, if we can do it for a satellite, we can probably do it for a healthcare model.
Correct.
In fact, in the presentation this morning, they talked about sterilizing equipment in Europe.
Yep.
And they said, well, we're just going to make a model and see where the flaws and weaknesses are, and we can adapt it that way. And that, believe me, that saves so much money. I mean, there's a savings just there in analysis, isn't it?
Completely. And that's where, looking at the history of analytics, seeing is believing in a lot of ways, and seeing those outputs. And SAS actually acquired a gaming analytics team. And you think about, if you say digital twin, people may or may not know what you're talking about. When you say, think about a video game environment, generally someone knows where they have a child that probably plays too much of it. And so this gaming analytics division, it's been incredible to take their knowledge, their artistry skills, marry that up with the data science side and apply it from everything to an oil rig, or like you saw, utility grids earlier this morning, all the way to the use cases that we're talking about with the federal government. And so to me, that's sort of that next wave of it, is starting to actually see what is that analytical journey versus it just being the actual code that happens.
So SAS is known for analytics, and we have this big wave coming over us called artificial intelligence. And so how does your decades-long experience influence the way SAS approaches today's AI opportunities?
Yeah, no, and I made the joke earlier. My husband and I say there's 3 in the marriage, him, me, and Claude. So, I certainly understand AI being involved in day-to-day lives. And so from our standpoint, I think what you see is where there are big investments across not only the industry, but also government, SAS is embracing it. So there's many LLM providers out there that are investing big in them. Government's certainly working with some of them. We're partnering with them. We're making sure that if a government agency wants to use Copilot, or eventually maybe Claude again, who knows, there's capabilities that allow for that integration for folks to be able to interact with the LLMs. But the governance piece of it, I was actually sitting earlier with someone from Department of War next to me, and we were watching that demo. And what I shared with him on sort of that interaction with the chatbot was, what you don't see there is SAS is acting as a gateway between the two. So even though you're querying, you're writing in plain language, SAS is actually protecting your organization's data, so your data is not then going to that end organization on that side. So one, you've got sort of the security protection. You've got the governance of when you're asking questions, it's limited to your data side of things there. But at the same time, you're able to adapt with, how other companies are innovating as well and being able to work with that technology.
10 o'clock this morning, I was listening to Alan Weber just across the hall here, and he works for IDC. And they do these studies, and they ask thousands of people, and they go, well, hey, what's your problem with AI? 46% say they have a trust dilemma. On the one hand, it can be on the other hand, how do you trust the data? And so that's where SAS fits in. And this is exactly what he said. Well, you just said it there. You said, they can provide the trust that people need to be able to handle some of these newer technologies that may have certain problems with making up answers. They could have hallucinations, and because it's a non-deterministic model, the answers could vary.
Yep, and that's why I love Reggie Townsend, who didn't speak today, but he's a leader at our company that focuses on our data ethics practice. So much of what they're developing is about translating the governance and risk around what's developed around AI. And you saw some of that capability that Alan referenced, which was almost like a nutrition label. It's the best, and this is a bad joke.
Yeah.
Like, we can all read a nutrition label. Doesn't mean I always follow it. No, sometimes you still go for the Oreos. Not always the healthy choice there. But to me, it's one step further in educating not only citizens, but folks across the agencies around, here's exactly what's gone into this. Here's what you know in terms of a shortcoming, versus for so long, I don't think people really knew what went into models. They took sort of, that output and they ran with it, which is great. That's what the technology had at the time. But now so many more people are getting to learn more about it and make decisions around it.
There's one concept here I just want to maybe close with, and maybe people don't really realize this because it shocked me when I heard it this morning, is that one of your leaders here, Udo, he said that with artificial intelligence, small errors can compound. It dawned on me, wow, like you forget to change your oil in your car, and you get by 10, 15,000 miles, and all of a sudden it breaks down the highway. And so this is a concept that I think people don't really understand, that SAS can help with the details in preparing the data and making sure you don't wind up in a compounded problem 3 months, an unexpected opportunity, huh?
Yeah, and I think that's reflective of what we are also seeing across agencies. I do think there will be compounded problems, but I think that's part of sort of the balance that you see between agencies, where a project might start as an individual's great idea, where they think AI can help a particular mission problem. They go off and do what they need to do and solve that problem, but there's not necessarily coordination across the board with other parts of the agency. Conversely, I think AI just at the enterprise level doesn't always map to what individual employees need to be able to solve the mission problem. So I do think there's somewhere in the middle that we're starting to see that balance of do you see AI forced from top down at agencies or support from bottom up? And so I think we're really getting to an interesting part to see sort of what's going to push sort of the adoption and usage of the actual applied AI use case versus the theoretical push from something, and is it adopted or not?
Yeah, and the theme I hear in our conversation, what we began with trust. It was like, okay, we've got all these data here, we've got all these opportunities, but really the results, and especially the people at the Department of War, I mean, you were sitting next to someone at lunch, they don't make arbitrary decisions over there, do they? They don't like this non-deterministic model. They want to know what's going to happen if something bad happens. Huh?
Yeah. And you know what the example I'll give too is, you think back to just a few years ago. If you look at some of the contracts that were out in federal around analytical modeling, you would have a model refresh that happened once every 3 years. That is insane to think of with AI, when it's like, oh yeah, we'll review this model once every 3 years and then give it an update. Now it is in real time. The model's expected to update. It's supposed to run unsupervised or human in the loop, depending on the use case. So I do think so much of this is changing at a clip that's so fast. It's which use cases can really be helped out by AI, but to your point, which ones are critical where you need a human in the loop and things need to be modernized more closely. And I think that's where we're seeing that dichotomy of the process of where can AI help versus where is it somewhere where it can be helpful from a productivity standpoint, but you wouldn't necessarily want it decisioning.
So if you're listening to this podcast and you're walking your dog or on the golf course, we'll put a link to SAS Federal on the show notes page so people can find more information. Maybe the next time you're doing a road show, they can come down and hear from people like you about practical applications for the federal government. You have been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, Caroline Baldwin, Director, SAS Federal.
Thank you.